Today, I'm going to be telling you guys the story of going down to swampy Florida to visit with Steve and Lora Schwarzer, along with Logan Gilihan and Will Stelter. So Will calls me on February 12th, that's a Sunday, and says, Wednesday, I'm gonna be coming your way, and I can pick you up and take you down to Florida. So after a conversation with my wife, she agreed. It was a great opportunity for me to hang out with some friends that I don't get to see very often and learn some really cool stuff from a maker that's been making amazing stuff for a long time. Steve is a pioneer in the Damascus world. He pioneered canister Damascus, and he's come up with all kinds of cool stuff as far as Damascus. And I am not super experienced with Damascus yet, and so this kind of gets my feet wet and really helps me to understand how mosaics and all these cross-sectional patterns, how they work and how to kind of plan them out. So I booked a flight back from Florida to home, and Will picked me up on Wednesday, and we drove down to Florida. On the way, we stopped at Cormark International, which is a really cool spot for finding all kinds of exotic woods. You can get stuff for like wood turning, bowl turning, and stuff like that. But we got some African blackwood. That place was really cool.
Well,
that's quite a haul.
That was a good haul.
So we then went on down the coast, which was absolutely gorgeous. Beautiful sunset on the way. And we got there around 9 o'clock, I think, and we went straight to bed because we were tired. Will slept outside in his Go Fast camper, and I slept inside. So day one, I enjoyed a beautiful sunrise over the lake, and then we went in and got started chopping up steel and getting it ready for a billet. And then I actually watched Steve weld up a canister Damascus. That was super, super cool. I am a visual learner, so seeing that kind of thing makes it real for me, makes it attainable for me. Awesome experience seeing that right off the bat.
I think I'm gonna go spelunking real quick.
Do what?
Today I'm gonna go spelunking.
Okay.
Explore the cave over there. What cave?
It's all titanium, I believe. That's steel, obviously.
Why is that obvious?
Because it's rusty. Oh. Shoot.
What are you looking for?
It's a 6.5-inch Colombian post vise.
If there's a vise nearby, this guy will sniff it out.
What happens is it's building pressure, and you have to let that pressure off. When I pull it out, you see it quits spewing. It'll take a little bit for that to slow down.
Yeah.
But you don't want it blowing all your powder out.
Right.
And then I came up with a kind of a simple pattern that I wanted to try just to get kind of the basics of doing mosaics and stuff like that. So what I was shooting for was kind of a crisscross ivy leaf pattern. This is kind of what I was shooting for. I'll put a picture right here. And I'll go through the steps of kind of how I was planning to do that. So he forged that out and then forged it down into C's that we then stacked to create W's. And the plan was to split it down the middle of those C's or W's, and that would drag those layers in and create this heart leaf shape pattern that would then be re-squared and go up into the corners of the billet. So Steve started out by welding that billet together. So day 2, I went in and I restacked the billet that Steve started for me. He had created the C's, so I needed to create the W's that we can then split. So restacked it. I can't remember how many times. I think it was 8 times that I restacked it and then split it down the middle with a big feathering die that he had for his press. That worked actually really well. The feathering die worked super, super well. You do have to make sure you put something on it to keep it from sticking, like a die lube. So if you use a feathering die, like a splitting die, it can get stuck and basically fused to that steel, and then it's stuck on there, and that's a big problem. So you use beeswax, or beeswax and graphite is a pretty common one, and that's what you usually use for keeping that die from sticking. So day 2, we ended with 2 big chunks after having split it in half, 2 big chunks that were ready to weld back together to create that W's. And I was really hoping that those C's or the W's would split right down the middle and drag those layers, the top layers, down into the bottom layers. It would hopefully create that heart shape pattern. So day 3, I cleaned up those 2 big chunks and got them ready to re-weld. Logan actually fusion tigged it because he's got more experience with that. He fusion tigged it all the way around. That just means you're not adding any extra material when you weld it. You're just using the materials that are there, so you don't have to grind off any MIG layers after the whole thing's done. So fusion tigged that together, and then we put it in the forge and got it really, really hot. Forged it together. And then what we wanted to do, since what we were hoping to get was this, we wanted that to go from corner to corner on the billet. So after we got it hot enough, we forged it back together and created kind of a square bar, and then we actually re-squared it. So we took it on a 45, so you got a square and you take it and you put it on a 45 and you forge those corners down and you create new corners. And then what that does is it takes the pattern and it pushes it across from corner to corner rather than straight down the middle of that cross section. So after doing that, I chopped it and etched it to reveal what the pattern looked like, and I was really hoping for that beautiful leaf looking pattern or heart looking pattern going across from corner to corner. But what it actually looked like was not that. I don't know what it looked like. It just looked like it didn't drag those layers down enough, I think is what really happened. Maybe the cutter wasn't quite dull enough, or we didn't have the C's close enough to the middle. It could be any of those things, but regardless, it didn't look the way I wanted it to. But I went ahead and four-wayed that, so I alternated them so they were all pointing towards the middle, and that's called an explosion pattern. It's all coming out of the middle. And then you take that, weld that together, and the plan at the end of that, if I didn't like that, was to twist it. And since I didn't like it after I had four-wayed it and forged it out into a bar, I didn't really like the way the pattern looked that way. I went ahead and I just twisted it. That was Will's idea, to twist it up. And Mosaic actually looks really cool when it's twisted. So I twisted it, I re-squared it, And then what I did was I split it into equal pieces. So I split the middle out, the middle section out, which is actually the nicest part. That's the nicest pattern you have because you're getting closer to the middle. The further out on a twist pattern you get, the more it looks like a candy cane. So you really want to get in towards the middle of that Damascus pattern. So I bandsawed it, I bandsawed the sides off, and I forged blades out of the middle piece, and then I took the outside pieces and I flipped them on their backs and forge welded those together. And that was Steve's idea. That's actually a really cool idea where you save those outside pieces, where you would normally just grind through that. I saved those outside pieces and forge welded them together, and I was able to use those pieces. And that turned out really, really cool too. It was a more bold, loose pattern, and that way you have the inmost pattern on the outside of the blade. It doesn't look quite as good as the very inside pattern, and the more you grind into it, the worse it is because you're getting closer to the outside of the billet. This is really hard to explain, but basically you have the best pattern in the middle. You want to save that and use that for your blades, and then the outside pieces, usually it gets ground off or thrown away or whatever, it's scrap. But Steve actually said flip it inside out, weld it together, and you can use that for your blades. You have to forge those closer to shape so that you don't grind through and get to that kind of candy cane pattern, but it worked really well. It did stretch and distort the pattern a bit, but I think it still looks pretty cool. And on a more complex pattern, I think it would have looked even better because it's just a little more detailed. Whereas when you have a big bold pattern and then you distort it even more, stretch it out with bevels and all of that, it just gets even more bold and loose and kind of chaos, which can kind of look cool. But so that was day 4 that I split it and re-welded it, and I took those pieces home. That was the last day. Day 4 was the last day, and that's all I could do is forge weld those things together and take those pieces home with me in my luggage. And I was able to forge a couple blades out, and this is what they look like. I actually have one with me. So I actually brought this one with me. I'll show you in better light. This is a really sweet little blade, and this is one of the inner patterns. So it's got a crazy, it's very flowing because I forged it to shape. I forged the point and all that, so the pattern kind of gets forced up into that point. Some people don't like that, but I really like the kind of organicness of that, and it shows that I forged it to shape, at least a little bit. But you can really see that mosaic pattern being kind of contorted throughout that twist in this pattern. So the patterns I got out of the middle were super, super tight and crazy looking. It's the best, I think, the best I could hope for as far as what I did. But this is just an example of what I learned there. I mean, it was really just to get my feet wet again with learning this stuff and figuring out how to do mosaics. And so this was a really good start on learning that. I also learned a ton from Will. I had a great time just hanging out with those guys, and I learned a ton from Will. Will has a ton of experience already with mosaic patterns and Damascus in general, and his mind really, really is geared towards those shapes and doing different patterns and stuff like that. And he says he sees them everywhere and now, and he can't help but try and figure out how to create patterns that he sees in nature and stuff that he sees around in his life and try and make those into a pattern. So that's pretty cool. He can do that. I have a harder time with that. It's just not how my brain works. But I can draw things and figure out how they might turn out and then try and do that. Procreate actually is a really cool app on an iPad where you can take your Apple Pencil, draw an initial billet and distort it and figure out how to kind of manipulate it to create a cool pattern. And so I've been playing with that a lot, and I'm really excited to create some of the patterns that I've come up with. But this was really one of those opportunities where you enjoy hanging out with friends and meeting new people. So being able to get to know Steve and Lora was a real treat, and I really, really enjoyed that. I'm very thankful to them for letting us come out and forge in his shop and learn from him a bit, and for Lora for hosting us there. So the moral of the story is, don't be obsessed with this stuff. because this stuff is not going to last. What's going to last is friendships and relationships that you build over time. And so that's much more valuable than anything you can make or buy or learn or any of that stuff. And so 100% recommend getting to know Steve. He's at Blade Show pretty much every year. Steve and Lora both. And Will, go check out Will's Instagram and his YouTube. Will Stelter, just type that in Instagram, YouTube, you'll find him. And then Logan as well with Northwest Bladeworks. I think he's got a YouTube, but he hasn't posted in a little while. I'm sure he'll get back around to that, but he makes really cool knives as well. So go check them out. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit the like button if you like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Have a good day.
Rope.
Yeah, it's a big hawser. I got some more. I'm gonna stretch some of it out, and I'm gonna start walking it in the morning. So. I don't know what kind of grinders I use. Have you ever heard of these people?
No, it's weird.
They're pretty good.
Can't read it that way.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Let me do it like this.
Oh, there we go.
All right. This is for you, Andrew.